So your Humidiverse Mist-Free 20 unit, this is going to be a test shoot. Yours will be the white finished powder coat like the rest of the unit. First thing you want to do when starting up a unit is ensure that the unit is not plugged in and the on-off switch is in the off position. You don't want to plug the unit in or turn it on until the startup procedure is complete. The unit would have shipped with the factory Y strainer. This is for the incoming water line. The Y strainer is a debris strainer that would catch any particles in the water, debris that could get into the unit. If debris from the water line gets into the unit, it can sometimes stick the solenoid valve open and cause the unit to overflow. So you take your Y strainer and plug it right into the water supply line of the humidifier. It's also a good idea to take the facility's incoming water and flush the water line, especially with a new DI system, RO, water treatment, construction site. You want to get any debris in the water line out so that there's no chance that it can get into the unit. We typically will flush a water line for 10 to 15 minutes just to ensure that nothing can get into the humidifier. There will be 3 black thumb screws on each side of the humidifier. You can remove these by hand to remove the fan cover to take care of the rest of the startup. So you'll remove your 6 thumb screws, 3 on each side, and then you'll be able to remove the entire fan cover from the front of the unit. Please note and be careful when you're removing the fan cover. There is a hardwired line between the humidistat and the Mist-Freeze hip panel itself, so be careful when moving your fan cover to the side, taking that into account. This will allow you access to the inside of the unit itself where the fuses, relays, wiring, and fans are located. When the unit is shipped, the WaterGuard sensor tube itself will be wrapped in plastic with the salt in it in this location as well. This unit does not have the WaterGuard hardwired to it yet. Yours will, but the components will look the same in the same places. This will be your WaterGuard tube. Just set this aside for now. We will later install it on the unit to start it up. By default, the unit's fans will only turn on when the transducers are active. There is a very simple switch you can do to make the fans hardwired and stay on. This is useful for high humid environments to keep mold and wetness from growing in the chute itself. If your customer ever requests this, there's a very easy switch. There's a black wire that wires to the bottom of terminal 10. This is the 120 volts that goes to the fans that's fed from a relay. If you want the fans to remain on constantly, you would remove this wire from the bottom of number 10 and move it over to the 8th block. This would be a constant 120 volts, so your fans always stay on. It works very well in situations where customers require that. On the back of the stainless vertical itself, there'll be 3 black ball nuts. You can remove these by hands to remove the chute and get at the water pan itself. Turn it by hand and remove it, and then we can pull the chute out of the water pan itself. Once you have the 3 ball nuts off, you can remove the chute. The chute has 3 bolts that come through the stainless steel vertical. So when you remove it, you want to pull the chute back and then out of the water pan. So you'll tilt it back to free the bolts. And then lift the chute out of the water pan. Note this as well when putting the chute back in. There are foam insulation around the fan holes. You don't want to catch those with the chute and damage or rip those in any way. So when you're placing the chute back on, you'll come in at an angle and kind of click it back into place. Move the chute down and click it back into place. Once you have the chute off, you'll now have access to the water pan. your water pan will be dry, it's always a good idea to put an inch or so of water into the water pan to ensure that the transducers can never be energized dry. Obviously, if the transducers are energized dry, it'll cause their immediate failure. At this point, you can connect the facility's water line to your Y strainer line so the unit has live water. Once the unit has live water in the water pan, you have the fan cover and chute removed, you can go ahead and plug the unit in as it's ready to start up. Once the unit is plugged in and has the water connected, has the inch or so of water in the water pan, you can flip the on-off switch on the front of the unit to turn it on. This will energize the solenoid to fill the unit up with a proper amount of water. The proper amount of water should be about a ½ inch or so off the float house itself. If water continues to flow over the float house, then something's stuck in the solenoid and it's going to overflow. Once the unit is filled up with the proper amount of water and the solenoid is turned off, you can then turn the humidistat on to run the unit. Let's swing around. The humidistat should have shipped in the off position. You simply hit the power button to turn it on. This number on top is the relative humidity in the room now. The number on the bottom is your set point. There is a decimal between those two zeros. That is 10.0 or 10. That can sometimes cause confusion where people think that is 100. The humidistat will move in increments of 0.5%. So when you're hitting the up button, you're moving 0.5%. So right now we have 48.5% relative humidity. In order to turn the unit on, you'd simply hold down the up arrow and move it up to your desired set point. You may see the actual reading fluctuate a bit as the unit clicks on and off for the first time while it's kind of balancing itself out. So we'll set this to 75, which will engage the unit. Once the unit engages, you will see bars moving up the side of the humidistat. As long as you see those bars moving up the side of the humidistat, the fan and the transducer should be active on the unit. As you can see, the transducers are all firing, have a 2 to 3 inch finger fountain off the top of them, and the mist rolling off that. As the unit uses water by creating humidity, the float would move down, engaging the solenoid to fill the unit back up. So this unit appears to be operating correctly. Your units also have the WaterGuard overflow system, which we'll talk about now. If the unit was to fill up with too much water, water would eventually reach this overflow tube. This would direct the water out of the overflow tube, and this is where you would attach your sensor tube. The sensor tube will have a small bag of salt in it. That's to put in the tube to create conductive water in the case of RO or DI water that doesn't conduct electricity well. That ensures that the sensor can pick up that water and trip very easily and quickly. So you'd simply screw the sensor onto the tube of the outside. Again, your sensor tube will already be hardwired through the unit, and these blue and white wires will come directly out of the optional WaterGuard line. You would take this sensor and screw it into the overflow. It does not need to be super tightened or Teflon. This is only going to be used in the case of an overflow. What is important is that you leave the tube in the position of the prongs on the top. If you leave the unit in the position of the prongs on the bottom, condensation and moisture from the humidifier can collect in here, pooling around the sensor and cause false water guard alarms. So always ensure that the sensor is finished in the top position. You would then place your salt and kind of push it into the back of the sensor, or you could push the salt into the back of the sensor before you screw it on. Again, that's to make sure that if that treated water gets in there, the salt will dissolve and make a good conductive point for that sensor to pick up. If you wanted to test the system, the water guard system, before you screw the sensor on, dunk it in your water so that the two prongs are covered in water. Now there is a good delay on this, about 10 to 15 seconds. This is to ensure that moisture splashes don't cause false alarms. You will need standing water on the sensor for 10 to 15 seconds before it'll trip. Once that water guard trips, it'll kill power to the unit, which will turn power off to the solenoid. It'll also set off a very loud, audible flashing alarm on the front of the unit. It is worth noting that if it is a mechanical failure, if debris is stuck in the solenoid itself, the water guard will shut power down to the unit, but mechanically the solenoid will still be stuck and could still allow water through to overflow. There is another safety solenoid that can be incorporated into the system that would turn off the supply water if the water guard was tripped. You may also want to pipe a condensate pan that the unit is in to drain to protect from any overflow possibilities. So after you've verified all the components and startup procedure, the unit's pretty much ready to run. You can put your chute back in. Again, careful not to hit that insulation on the fan. Reattach your ball nuts. Put your fan cover back on. It's a good idea to put that hard line between them, between the fans, just so it's out of the way and can't get pinched on anything. Replace your thumb screws on the side, and then turn your unit back on. Anytime you're working on the unit, obviously you want to unplug it and have it turned off. Once your unit's set back up and ready to turn on, again, the top number on the humidistat is the relative humidity in the room. The bottom number is your set point. You hit up and down to move your set point up and down. So we'll move our set point up to 60. There'll be a small delay while the humidistat registers that, and the unit will click on and run to 60%. The unit will turn itself off and on to maintain that 60% humidity level. In low humid environments, you will see little or none mist coming out of the unit. Sometimes fluorescent lighting above the unit can hit the mist just right where you see the mist. It's something about water and fluorescent lighting, but you should see little to no mist discharge out of the unit unless you're running up into higher levels of humidity. Mid 40s and 50s and higher, you will start to see a small discharge from the unit itself. If you have any other questions in starting up the unit, call us at UmidiFirst, 561-752-1936.